Welcome back to the Science of Peace. We're going to continue our discussion with You Are the Placebo, of course. So, I want to talk about some information that I've been learning from this book and just looking at some of these recent research studies that they've been doing with based on your beliefs and your perceptions. You know, how you see the world, how you think, and also there's this thing that's called priming, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But how you think and what you believe greatly affects your mental performance, how successful you are, and even how you think other people view you or view your culture or race or whatever can affect your performance as well. And here are some examples from science-based research studies. So I'm going to tell you about this one study. In 2006, it's a study from Canada, and they took 220 female students. And they had these 220 female students read fake research studies. And in those research studies, it claimed that men had a 5% advantage over women in math performance. Okay? So all of them, the 220, read all of these reports. So then they divided the group in two. They had one group read that the advantage was due to recently discovered genetic factors. Okay? So basically, the recently discovered genetic factors showed that men genetically were smarter in math due to some type of defect that's in women. Now, of course, this was fake, but they read this. Then they took the other group, and they had the other group read that the advantage actually resulted from the way that teachers stereotyped girls and boys in elementary school. Okay? So they have two different perceptions, two different beliefs within these two groups. Now, thinking about that, who do you think scored higher on the standardized test that they gave them? Yeah. So the women who read that men had a genetic advantage scored lower than those who read that men had an advantage due to stereotyping. In other words, when they were primed to think that their disadvantage was inevitable, the women performed as if they truly had a disadvantage. So you kind of see what we're talking about when we say primed. Like you're given some information that primes you to believe a certain thing or to perceive a certain thing, right? So there's a scientist at Stanford University, a social psychologist. His name is Claude Steele, right? So he did more studies, and check out these results. So he did a study where he basically used this whole stereotyping thing here. So Steele gave a math test to a group of white and Asian men who were strong in math. They were already strong in math, right? The white men in the group who were told that Asians do slightly better than whites on the test, that's how he primed them, okay? So he primed the white men by telling them that Asians do slightly better in math. Now, how do you think they did? Let's see. So when Steele gave a math test to a group of white and Asian men who were strong in math, the white men in the group who were told that Asians do slightly better than whites on the test, indeed didn't do as well as the white men in the control group who weren't told that. Okay? So you had two groups, all white men. One group was told Asians do better in math. The other group was not told that. So they primed the one group, right? The one group who was primed to believe or to hear or to know or to acknowledge that Asians do better didn't do as well as the other group of whites who did not get primed. Okay? So they're starting to see that this is continuous, right? Now, they call this priming. Of course, how does this affect us? And when I say us, I'm talking about people that look like you and I, brown folks, you know what I'm saying? Whatever you want to call yourself, black, brown, African American, Moors, Hebrews, whatever. All right, so look. A similar effect has been documented with African American students who have historically scored lower than whites on vocabulary, reading, and math tests, including the SATs. Even when socioeconomic class is not a factor. Why is this? Imagine why this could be. Well, what is the overall perception and belief of the so-called African American culture? How are we portrayed in media, in movies? Like, all of this has a great effect. All the stuff that's going on with the police and all this stuff. Everybody perceives us in a certain way. On purpose, of course. But anyway, the average black students score below 70 to 80% of the white students of the same age on most standardized tests. So look, this professor or this psychologist, Claude Steele, he explains this effect and he calls it stereotype threat. And he says it is to blame. Basically, research shows that students who belong to groups that have been negatively stereotyped perform less well when they think their scores will be evaluated in light of the stereotype than they do when they feel no such pressure. So students who feel the pressure of who's going to be grading their test, who's viewing the test, and they're already in a group that's been considered what he calls stereotype threat, they score lower automatically, regardless of how smart they are. But the students who, like, if you tell the students, this is a no pressure test, you just got to take the test to take the test, those students score better. So it was a landmark study conducted with Joshua Aronson. Researchers gave a series of verbal reasoning tests to Stanford sophomores. Some of the students were given instructions that primed the stereotype that blacks score lower than whites by saying that the quiz they were about to take was designed to measure their cognitive ability, while the others were told that the test was merely an unimportant research tool. Who do you think scored better? Of course, the black students who were primed scored lower than the black students who were not primed, and they were told that the test was unimportant. And this was based on their perception, because you're already in a group, a so-called group of blacks, right, that the world perceives in a certain way. The world perceives that whites score better on math tests, or whites score better on standardized tests. And the student, we know the pressures, we feel the pressures, even if you don't speak upon it, it's in your subconscious, you know what I'm saying? And the way that you view the way that you view the person who is scoring the test, or who's going to be evaluating the test, can deter you from not scoring as well, all based on beliefs and perceptions. But you might score better, and these students scored better when they didn't feel the pressure of who was going to be reviewing the test, grading the test, who was going to be evaluating, did it have any importance? Like your perceptions and your beliefs, and how you see the world see you matters. And you can think about that in relation to everything that's going on, social media, news, whatever. All of this stuff matters. And there's a very skewed perception on purpose on who we are as this race of people. Moors, black people, Hebrew, colored, etc. But ain't none of it true. Islam.